Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Human Stories, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The pain didn't build, it detonated. One second I was rinsing a coffee mug in my little Denver kitchen. The next I was folded over the sink, breath coming in thin animal pieces. Heat roared through my right side like someone had pressed a branding iron under my ribs. I fumbled my phone, thumbed 911, and tried to make the vowels behave. What's your emergency? Abdomen right side can't stand, I managed. Feels wrong. The operator kept me talking until the siren became real. There were boots in my hallway, a cool hand on my wrist, a flashlight hovering in my vision. Gallbladder, someone said to someone else. Fever's high. They lifted me, the ceiling slid past, and I thought absurdly about the coffee mug abandoned in the sink, like a witness who wouldn't be called. Do you want us to notify anyone? The paramedic asked as the gurney locked into place. My son, I said. Mark Carter. He's 20 minutes away. I tapped his name. Music and voices bled through the line, wind, laughter, a glass clink. Mom, can I call you back? We're on a rooftop. I'm going to Memorial, I said, fighting the tunnel closing in. They surgery. Okay. Text me, he said, and the line went useless in my hand. I dropped the phone when the next wave hit. Somewhere in the ambulance, the monitor alarmed and a voice said, sepsis risk, and I started bargaining with a god I hadn't spoken to in years. Just let me wake up once with ordinary light. I did. 3 days later, in a room that smelled like bleach and lemon tape tugging at my skin. You got lucky, the surgeon told me, matter of fact. Acute cholecystitis gone septic. We pulled it in time. I reached for my phone. No missed calls, no messages. A nurse checked the chart when I asked. No visitors under your name, Ms. Carter. We can try again. I tried again more than a dozen times over 4 days. Mark to voicemail, his wife Lena to an infinite ring. Each message sounded like a different woman, worried, then embarrassed, then angry for having to audition for my own child's attention. I told myself they were busy. I told myself anything that would keep the room from tipping. On the 7th morning, a doctor signed discharge papers and ran through rules: no lifting, no driving. Someone to change the dressings. My son will help, I lied, summoning a smile from a face that felt borrowed. I took a rideshare home because pride likes a meter running. The driver turned onto my block, then slowed. You sure this is it? It was, and it wasn't. My bungalow, the one with the cottonwood that dumped half of autumn in a single day, wore a fresh red and white sign punched into the yard, sold. I stared at the letters until they blurred, then at the porch where plastic totes and banker's boxes sat, stacked in the thin winter sun. The driver asked if I wanted him to wait. I said no because humiliation is more private on foot. I climbed the steps one at a time. Packing tape flashed in hard little smiles across cardboard. A white envelope lay on top of a box, my name printed in my son's tidy block letters, Mom. Inside was a single sheet. We streamlined everything so you don't have to stress. New owners take possession next week. We boxed what matters. The rest is being donated. Sunset Mesa, living is expecting you Monday at 9 a.m. Emia, M and L, streamlined, expecting. I swallowed against the taste those words left. Inside the house sounded different, hollow in a way that registered behind the ears. The living room sofa was gone, the battered coffee table with the rings from 100 mugs gone. In the dining room, the wall looked too bright where a sideboard used to gather holiday cards, and the corner where my husband once set a record player had become air. I pressed a palm to the doorway of the small bedroom that had been mine and Robert's. The bed frame was missing. My mattress lay on the floor. The quilt my mother sewed was folded carelessly across it, a little triangle of stitches turned the wrong way. In the kitchen, a glossy trifold brochure leaned against the sink as if it had been placed for light reading. Sunset Mesa Living, it announced in cheerful font with photos of smiling people in matching cardigans. The rate in smaller type, $4, $200 per month. Below that, a business card with a first name in bubble letters and the words, Move-In Coordinator. I dialed Mark. He answered on the second ring as if he had been waiting for this particular collision. You're home, he said. What did you do, I asked, and I wasn't sure which of us sounded older. What needed to be done, he said. Voice arranged in that calm that people put on for courtrooms and parent-teacher meetings. You scared us, Mom. You were in the hospital alone. Lena found a place with good reviews. The house was too much. You sold my house. It's our house, he said. You put me on the deed years ago, remember, to make it easy later. We exercised the power of attorney because the hospital said you were incapacitated. The room tilted. Incapacitated is not a synonym for invisible. You can't be there alone anymore, he said gentler. Sunset Mesa has a shuttle meal, plans nurses. We paid the deposit, Monday at 9. The manager said you can bring a few personal items. The deposit. I stared at the brochure like it might blink first. With what? We've been covering the big stuff for years, he said. Taxes, maintenance. I looked at the stack of paid tax receipts in my desk. No, not there anymore. And at the empty square where Robert's refinished table should have sat. I'm hanging up, I said, because every sentence I wanted to say would have cost blood. I set the phone down and lowered myself to the mattress. The incision throbbed in time with my pulse. There's a noise grief makes in the body when it has nowhere polite to go. It sounds like silence from the outside. I lay in that quiet until the light changed. Then I did what I've always done when there's more to carry than arms broke the load into pieces. I reached for the practical first. I found a duffel in a box labeled bedroom and filled it with what I could lift without swearing: a few changes of clothes, toiletries, the folder with my birth certificate, and social security card that someone had tossed into a kitchen box like a spatula. I tucked the photo of Robert in his ball cap into the side pocket, face toward the fabric so it wouldn't get scratched. Then I called the only person I could think to call when the floor moves. Ruth, I said when she picked up, and I didn't have to finish the sentence. She'd been my friend since we were both 23 and broke. She could read a whole paragraph in a breath. I'm getting in the car, she said, 45 minutes. While I waited, I walked the rooms like a witness. I touched the nail hole where a picture had hung, the patch of sun-bleached floor where a rug had rested, the seam in the doorway, where Robert once banged his shin carrying in a thrift store dresser. Everything felt lighter and unfamiliar, as if the house had been killed and painted. A horn sounded outside. Ruth climbed the porch in her sensible boots, mouth already set to furious. She took one look at my face and redirected the fury to logistics. Bag, she asked. Medications, bandage, supplies. We moved like an army of two. She changed the dressing with hands that have raised 3 children and 1 husband through every small disaster. She tucked the brochure for Sunset Mesa into her purse without comment, as if it were evidence to be presented later. Stay with me, she said. We'll get you sorted. I locked the front door out of the muscle memory and then remembered it wasn't mine to lock anymore. I set the key back on the little hook by the kitchen entry because some habits are stubborn and some goodbyes need a gesture. On the porch, I paused. The sold sign caught the last light and threw it back at me. I hated the way the red looked against my cottonwood. I carried the duffel to Ruth's car and buckled the seatbelt slowly so the strap wouldn't cut across the bandage. She started the engine. The heater coughed to life, the vents finally remembering their job. As we pulled away, I took out my phone and scrolled past Mark's name to Omar Patel, the financial advisor I hadn't called in months because ordinary life had felt like thrift store stability. He picked up on the first ring. Evelyn, he said, what can I do for you? I need an appointment, I said. Soon. He heard what I didn't say. Tomorrow morning. 10. Bring whatever documents you have. We'll go step by step. Ruth merged onto the boulevard, hands steady on the wheel. The bungalow shrank in the rearview mirror until it became a rectangle of color you could mistake for something else. Breathe, Ruth said quietly, eyes on the road. I did slowly as Denver slid past stoplights, a diner with the neon. Finally fixed a woman walking a dog that looked like a rug with hope. I set my palm over my abdomen so the movement wouldn't jolt the stitches. By the time we reached Colorado Springs, night had arranged itself over the mountains, clear and unapologetic. Ruth pulled into her driveway, and the porch light blinked on as if it recognized me. Inside, she fussed with pillows and argued with the kettle, and let me be silent without filling the space. I lay down in her guest room and watched the shadow of a tree move across the ceiling. The house was strange and kind. The mattress was not mine, but it held. I slept with the phone on the nightstand screen down, as if I could keep the world from shining in where it didn't belong. By morning, Ruth had bullied the guest room into comfort: fresh towels, folded like sails, a mug waiting beside the kettle pills, lined in a neat little parade. I woke to the elastic ache of stitches and the dry mouth of hospital air. Ruth handed me coffee and said 10 o'clock as if time itself worked for her. Omar Patel's office smelled like paper and cedar. He rose when we entered, all late 50s warmth and careful eyes. Evelyn, he said, taking in the bandage, peeking above my waistband without commenting. Let's make the next hour boring in all the right ways. He set a leather binder between us and opened it like a map. Numbers appeared in clean columns, accounts. I knew accounts I'd forgotten, one I had stared at in better years without fully understanding. He tapped a page with a penciled circle. Your dividend and interest stream this year projected at 72,000, I said, because sometimes you have to say a number out loud for it to sit down. Before the tax, he nodded. Mostly qualified dividends from the blue chip basket Robert favored, plus the laddered munis we've been building since 2017. You've reinvested for years, so the cash flow matured quietly. It can turn on like a faucet. Mark says he's been covering my taxes, I heard myself say, and the room seemed to tilt a degree. Omar slid another tab forward, property tax receipts electronically pulled from the county site. Every line had my name on it. You've paid on time every year, he said gently. Ruth made a small sound beside me, the sound you make when you stub a toe, and also realized the door has been unlocked all along. Omar respected silences the way good doctors do. When he spoke again, it was with the cadence of procedure. Immediate steps, he said. We freeze exposure points. New passwords not written in a kitchen drawer. 2-factor on everything. Credit freeze with all 3 bureaus. We migrate investment accounts into a revocable living trust. Your name as trustee today, a successor you choose for later. New will align to the trust. Healthcare directive. Fresh financial power of attorney that only springs when 2 independent physicians certify incapacity. He glanced up. And we revoke any prior powers that could be misused. Already misused, I said, tasting the word. They told me they activated it. We'll see what they think they activated, he said, voice still gentle. Do you have the old documents? In a file box that may be in a donation bin by now. Heat climbed my neck. We can request copies from the drafting firm, Omar said. And if we run into unusual obstacles, I'd like you to meet someone. He slid me a card, Dana Whitmore, Whitmore Elder and Estates. Today, Ruth said as if she were ordering lunch. Today, Omar agreed. He picked up his phone, stepped into the hall, and returned with a nod. 2 o'clock. He saw us out with a checklist and a small steadying smile. In the elevator, Ruth exhaled like a pressure valve. 72, she said under her breath, half awe, half reprimand to the universe for not advertising good news better. Dana's office occupied a renovated brick building that had once been a hardware store. The reception smelled of lemon oil and dusted books. Dana herself looked like someone who had argued with a storm in one 40-something flat shoe's eyes that didn't blink for effect. She didn't ask for the story first. She asked for the paper. Ruth placed the Sunset Mesa brochure on the table as if she were setting down Exhibit A. I slid over the Omar packet, my driver's license, the hospital discharge summary with its neat block letters. Dana scanned annotated with a pen that clicked when she made a point and then opened a blank legal pad. Here's the structure as I expect we'll find it, she said. Years ago, you added your son to the deed as joint tenant with right of survivorship. Common well-intended, often disastrous. Somewhere along the line, a financial power of attorney was executed, maybe broad, maybe springing on incapacity. Your son and his spouse used that to justify steps they had no business taking. She drew boxes and arrows without looking down. Key questions. Did the POA truly spring that requires written certification by a physician or 2 depending on the document? Did a notary actually witness signatures used to sell the house? I'm seeing fast-track closings with mobile notaries who later have very convenient amnesia. If electronic signatures were involved, there's an audit log IP address, timestamps device. If any of that smells like a shortcut, we have leverage. Can we get my house back, I asked, knowing even as I spoke that you can't unscramble an omelet. Possibly not, Dana said, and I appreciated that she didn't pad the no. A bona fide purchaser complicates rescission, but we can challenge the transfer and seek compensation, and we can file a lis pendens, if appropriate, to keep further shenanigans from ripening. More importantly, we lock down you. Trust will new medical and financial directives, revocations recorded and sent to the usual suspects. She tapped the legal pad. I'll subpoena the notary journal if a notary is named. I'll request the DocuSign or Adobe audit trails if they used e-signatures. I'll order the hospital chart to see if a physician letter exists, and if so, what it says. If your signature shows up where you weren't, we'll know. Do we have to involve the police? Ruth asked. Her voice held knives she hadn't unsheathed. We don't have to do anything today, Dana said. We document. Paper has a long memory. We spent an hour building a chronology. I recited dates. Ruth supplied verbs when mine failed. Dana gathered loose threads and tied them in little knots. Before we left, I signed a sheaf of authorizations. The pen felt heavier than it looked. Outside, the light had shifted toward evening, that thin winter clarity that makes every color honest. Ruth drove us to a diner and slid a menu toward me like a treaty. I ate soup and toast as if they were proof of concept. By the time we returned to her house, exhaustion had stacked sandbags behind my eyes. I slept early and hard to the metronome click of the bathroom fan and the odd comfort of a stranger's hallway. Over the next week, Dana moved like weather across a map. Emails appeared, requests sent to title company, awaiting closing packet. Hospital compliance confirms no incapacity letter in file, requesting physician attestation. Notary journal requested. Counsel for escrow has been put on notice. Omar moved to. Trust drafted. Review for names of trustees and beneficiaries. New account numbers attached. Do not share by text. A courier arrived with a bright red folder labeled Revocable Living Trust and a pen with more gravitas than a pen should reasonably possess. I signed where tabs told me to sign, and the sudden relief of seeing my name in the right places nearly buckled my knees. The house, the one that was not mine, solved itself in small steps. Dana filed revocations with the county. She sent certified letters. She copied me on just enough to keep me inside my own life without drowning me in it. The body remembered it was healing. I measured time and walks to the mailbox and back in the way the bandage tape stopped tugging when I breathed. Ruth kept me from lifting laundry baskets and from calling my son at midnight. When I reached for my phone, she said, "Write it down first. If it still feels good tomorrow, send it." Most of the pages ended up in the trash, which felt like progress. One afternoon, while Ruth argued with a recalcitrant smoke detector, I scrolled through rental listings with the idle hunger of someone looking at other people's kitchens. A photo stopped me, a white stucco casita behind a larger adobe, a thread of bougainvillea climbing the wall, a rectangle of shade promising a chair. Tucson. One-bedroom guest house, month to month, utilities included. I clicked more out of curiosity than intent. The owner, a woman named Alma, wrote back within the hour. There were photos of a tiny porch, of a chipped ceramic sink, of a view that held a slice of mountain and a lot of sky. "I keep a small library in the main house," she added, as if she had read the part of me that still arranged my days by chapters. "You're welcome to borrow." I showed Ruth. She read the listing twice, then looked at me over her glasses. "Dry air," she said. "Cheap electricity. Fewer memories to step on." 2 weeks later, the casita key sat in my palm like an uncomplicated sentence. The drive south unfolded in hours of road and the quiet that comes when a plan has already been made inside your bones. Alma met me in the gravel drive, a small hurricane of kindness with a braid down her back and a pitcher of water in her hand. "You must be Evelyn," she said, as if I were arriving to a place that had been saving a chair for me. The casita was not fancy. It was enough. A bed under a window, a table that admitted it was a desk, a tiny kitchen with a gas flame that caught on the first click. Alma had left a basket with tea crackers and a note that said, "Welcome." If you can't find something, it's probably in the blue cabinet I forgot to label. I set my red trust folder on the table next to Dana's card and the little jar of screws Ruth insisted I take because every house needs a jar of something that doesn't match. I placed Robert's photo on the shelf beside a cracked planter holding a stubborn aloe. I turned my phone face down and let the room be quiet. Outside, a cactus wren chattered on a fence post like a tiny heckler. The light thinned and cooled. Somewhere a wind chime did its small job. I lay down carefully, one hand on the bandage, and let the desert hush press its palm against my sternum until my breath matched it. The clock on the stove read 8:04 when I finally turned off the lamp. On the table, the folder glowed, its ridiculous red, a wordless promise that paper at least could be arranged. I slept with the window cracked, and the night came in clean. In Tucson, the mornings opened like clean pages. The casita warmed slowly, the gas burner caught on the first click, and the light through the kitchen window made even the chipped sink look deliberate. Alma showed me where she kept spare towels and which cupboard stuck in summer. If the swamp cooler argues, she said, tap the metal panel twice and say something encouraging. She left a small bowl of oranges on my table and a note that read, "Take as needed." I took one and sat with coffee sorting the pile Dana had insisted I label Medical Title Bank Miscellaneous. Paper behaved better in the desert. It didn't curl. I worked until the bandage tugged and then stopped. A quiet life has weight to it. It felt like something I could lift. The email arrived on a Tuesday. Subject line, "Sunrise Today." Second act's segment inquiry. The producer's name was Cara Liu. The tone brisk but not predatory. She'd heard about my situation through a professional referral and hoped I might be open to a conversation about financial autonomy after a sudden life change. "We'd keep names private," she wrote. "We're interested in process and principles." I read it twice and put the phone face down, then I called Ruth. "You could do a lot of good," she said. "You could also set yourself on fire on national television. So we make rules." We made rules. No identifying details about my son or even the city. No dollar amounts. No legal conclusions, only facts in the first person. Cara called the next day for a pre-interview. Her voice carried a reporter's habit of moving toward the center of a story without stepping on it. "You were discharged to find your home sold," she said, confirming each piece. "You engaged an advisor, restructured, moved. You're working with counsel to resolve the property issues. You want two things, safety and agency." "Yes," I said, surprised by how flat that sounded and how true it was. "They could arrange a remote from a Phoenix affiliate," Cara said. "Make up a chair and earpiece 10 minutes live. The segment anchor would be Amber Reyes, who did warm mornings better than anyone." I said I'd think about it, then went for a short walk under the white sky and the orderly guarded arms of the saguaros. When I came back, I said yes. Phoenix was 2 hours of highway and the low unease of driving someone else's car, Ruth's, while not fully trusting my own body. The affiliate studio lived in a beige building near the airport, the kind of architecture that tries to distract you with landscaping. A production assistant walked me through corridors into a room with a ring light and a chair that adjusted with a hydraulic sigh. "We'll clip the mic here," he said. "Look into camera 2. The delay is half a second." A woman named Maritza powdered me so I looked like I had slept 7 uninterrupted hours. Then the earpiece clicked and I heard the show as if my living room had learned to host strangers. Amber did the small talk that makes a live audience's shoulders go down. She teed up second acts with a graphic of a sunrise widening across a silhouette of mountains. Kara's voice came through my earpiece, a soft runway for my breath. 3 beats, she whispered. Event response framework. Joining us from Arizona is Evelyn, Amber said. That's not her real name. The camera's red light found me. Evelyn, you experienced a health crisis and then a housing change you did not initiate. How did you start again? I said what I had written down because the body forgets nouns when the heart runs. I said I called a friend and an advisor that we made the finances boring on purpose. I said trust will new directives revoking anything that could be waived like a permission slip. I said paper has a long memory. It helps to give it the right story to remember. And the money question, Amber said. Voice light as glass. You had invested quietly for years, and she glanced down, perhaps at a note, perhaps at a producer waving your portfolio, now provides approximately $72,000 a year in income. The number sat there in the air like an uninvited guest who had arrived early and taken the good chair. I kept my face neutral because the camera asked that of you. I had help, I said, neither confirming nor correcting. I learned to ask for it before a crisis rather than after. We closed with a line about community resources. Amber thanked me. The light went off and the assistant unclipped my mic. You were great, he said. No jargon. My hands shook anyway, so I put them in my lap and waited until they stopped pretending to be someone else's. I made it to the parking lot before the phone found a signal strong enough to remember I existed. The screen filled, then filled again. A cascade of banners. Mark, Mark, Mark. Lena. Unknown. The number of missed calls ticked upward like a slot machine. I watched it reach 93 and stop as if even urgency had a quota. I texted Ruth a single word. Home. She responded with a thumbs up and the address to a taco place she liked off I-10 so I'd have somewhere to stop if the world tilted. Back in the casita, the room noticed I was agitated before I did. My hands arranged the oranges into a line. I took the earpiece out of my bag and coiled the cord like it was something with feelings. Then I called Dana. 2 heads up, I said. Television happened. An anchor mentioned a number. I saw Dana replied. My mother loves that show. She thinks you have excellent posture. I'd prefer adequate privacy, I said. We'll handle what we can control, she said. And for what we can't, boundary statements short enough to memorize. Also, we just received 2 pieces you'll want to hear. Paper again, doing the job it was designed to do. Dana forwarded PDFs. The first was a reply from the hospital compliance office. There was no physician certification letter in my chart declaring incapacity. There never had been. The second was a notary journal response. The mobile notary whose stamp appeared on the deed transfer had no record of witnessing my signature on the date in question. Her journal showed her at a DMV 60 miles away during that time block. And a third thing, Dana said, her voice flattening slightly. We subpoenaed the audit trail for the e-signatures on ancillary documents. The IP address associated with your name resolves to a commercial office space leased by a marketing firm in Denver. Lena works in marketing, I said, feeling my mouth shape around a fact like it was a marble I hadn't realized I was holding. We'll keep to the facts, Dana said. The trail is the trail. I've sent preservation letters to the title company, the escrow agent, and the brokerage. We're also preparing a notice to the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. None of this is theatrical. It's arithmetic. Arithmetic landed in my inbox like a stone in a pond. Timestamps, IP addresses, notarization logs. The documents had metadata. The metadata had fingerprints in it. I printed what mattered and slipped it into the red folder under tabs Dana had labeled Notary E-Sign Hospital. The folder was absurdly bright against the casita's pale table, but the color helped when my thoughts tried to wander off. My phone buzzed again. Mark. I let it go to voicemail because every conversation has a temperature and mine needed to come down. He called again and again and then abruptly stopped. A text arrived, careful in its punctuation. Mom, please. I need to talk to you. I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Call me when you can. I set the phone face down and made tea exactly the way I like it, with the bag pulled before bitterness with honey from the jar Alma kept by the stove. Steam lifted and did its small repairs. Alma knocked once and leaned in, reading the air like mothers do. You're all right, she asked. I'm arranged, I said, which felt like the best truth available. She nodded toward the folder. You look like someone who has a plan. I have a process, I said. Plans are for people who sleep like they used to. She smiled at that and left a plate of shortbread by the oranges as tribute. In the late afternoon, a breeze came up and moved the bougainvillea in slow applause. I took the printed PDFs to the community copy shop to make a second set because redundancy comforts me. On the way back, I bought stamps I didn't technically need and a small rubber plant I technically did not have a window for. The clerk said, "Nice day," and I said, "It is," and meant the weather part. Ruth called at dusk. "You didn't explode," she said, as if surprised and proud. "Not externally," I said. Dana has the notary journal, the audit trail, and the hospital's no-letter letter. That last one, Ruth said, "Frame it." "Not yet," I said, but I printed too. We talked about nothing for 5 minutes on purpose. She reported a victorious battle with the smoke detector. I reported the stubborn aloe's refusal to die. We hung up without saying we loved each other because some phrases work better when they're implied. I opened a new notebook and wrote inventory at the top. I listed what had arrived that day: a national audience, a number spoken aloud, a son who suddenly discovered the telephone feature on his phone, a lawyer who preferred nouns to adjectives, proof that a signature could be located to a building where I had never stood. It looked neater written down. The casita got very quiet all at once, the kind of quiet that belongs to places where the horizon is a promise rather than a fence. I let it settle. I washed the one cup I had used, set it upside down to dry, and checked the bandage like it was a bedtime ritual I had always known. I turned my phone off because off is different from silent. On the table between the red folder and the bowl of oranges lay Kara's business card with a small handwritten note. "You did well. Thank you for trusting us." I slid it into the miscellaneous tab and closed the binder. Night came without weather, clean and direct. I left the window cracked and lay still until the room stopped taking stock of me. The desert does not negotiate. It offers what it has: open air, a place for your breath to be the size it is. I put my hand on my ribs and breathed until the counting in my head matched the counting in my chest. Then I slept. I waited a day before I answered Mark. Not to punish him, to lower the temperature so words could stand up. When the air inside my chest finally cooled, I sent 3 lines saguaro bean tomorrow at 2. Come alone. We will keep it brief. The cafe sat on a corner where the shade held like a favor. At 2 exactly, he walked in a little thinner beard he hadn't had the last time I'd seen him, the posture of someone bracing for weather. He scanned the room and found me by the window. For a second, he looked like the boy who used to bring me dandelions with the roots still attached. "Mom," he said. "Sit," I said, and slid the water across so his hands would have something to hold. He did what people do when they think an apology is a password. He started talking fast words running ahead of thought. I let him empty them out until the shoveling stopped. "Now we'll do it piece by piece," I said. "I ask, you answer, no speeches." He nodded. "Sunset Mesa's rate is $4,200 a month," I said. "My annuity pays $600. Explain how that arithmetic equals safety." He blinked, mouth opening and closing. "Lena said your investments would cover investments you believed didn't exist," I said, until a stranger on television said a number out loud. He stared at the tabletop. "I didn't know about that part." "You didn't ask," I said. "You assumed." "There's a difference." He rubbed the condensation into the wood with his thumb. "We were scared. You were in surgery. I panicked. You also sold a house while I was recovering from sepsis." I said, voice as flat as the surface between us. "And you told yourself that putting your name on my deed 10 years ago made it decent." He made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. "That was supposed to make everything easier. For whom I asked. You used a power of attorney that didn't spring with a physician letter that doesn't exist. A notary stamp showed up on a document in a county office, while the notary's own journal shows her at the DMV across town. The electronic signatures on auxiliary forms came from an IP block assigned to a marketing firm where your wife collects a paycheck." His eyes flicked up, then sharp with instinct. "You hired someone." "I hired a lawyer who knows where paper keeps its memory," I said. "You don't have to admit anything to me. You will put each step into writing for her." He swallowed. "Is this where you call the police?" "This is where I tell you the terms under which we can stop standing in public speaking in low voices like strangers," I said. "You will listen to all of them before you answer any of them." He nodded both hands around the water glass now. "First," I said. "Full compensation for my share of the house at fair market value, no family discount, no fantasy appraisals. Second, $30,000 for the cost of being displaced while bandaged and stitched. Third, a sworn statement detailing the timeline, who signed, what, where, and with what authority you believed you had. Fourth, no contact outside counsel until I say otherwise. If you need to say something, say it to my attorney and she'll decide if I need to hear it. Fifth, you will not under any circumstances manage, advise on, or suggest how I should manage my money." He stared at me as if I'd learned a new language. "If you meet those conditions," I said, "I won't pursue criminal charges. If you don't, we proceed as far as the paper takes us." A flush rose up his neck, shame fighting with self-defense. "Jessica, do not hide behind your wife," I said. "You signed. Your name is on the deed. Whatever scripts you read from your mouth, read them." He He put the glass down very carefully and pressed his fingers into his temples. When he looked at me again, the fight had gone out of his jaw. "I'll do it," he said. "All of it." He paused. "I'm sorry." The words didn't ask for anything. They just sat there unadorned. "Good," I said, not because forgiveness had appeared, but because agreement had. I texted Dana at the table. "Client and son present. Terms accepted subject to paper. Can you see us at 4? The bubbles pulsed, and then her answer landed. 4 works. Bring IDs. He should bring any closing documents in his possession. Mark and I walked the 2 blocks without speaking. Tucson's winter light made even the asphalt look honest. In the reception area, Dana's paralegal copied our licenses and brought water that tasted like air. Dana waved us into the conference room and took the head of the table without making a scene about it. "Mr. Carter," she said, "I'm glad you're here. We'll keep this simple." She slid a packet across tabs, a signature page, a blank affidavit with lines that looked longer than they were. "This is a settlement agreement in draft," she said. "Numbers will finalize after we confirm the purchase price, the escrow. Accounting and a neutral appraisal. The $30,000 is non-negotiable. The affidavit has prompts. You will complete it now in your own hand, and we will attach it. I will also need your authorization to retrieve the full closing file, including any communications you or your spouse had with the agent, broker, title company, or notary." Mark read as if reading could slow time. "What if he began?" "No, what ifs," Dana said, not unkindly. "Facts. If you don't recall something, right, I don't recall. If you believed you were authorized, write why. If you relied on someone, name them. Vague helps no one." He took the pen and began. His handwriting had not changed since 4th grade, Ernest determined to stay on the line. While he wrote, Dana turned to me. "We'll file revocations in the county where the deed was recorded," she said. "We have the hospital's no letter, the notary's journal, and the e-sign audit trail. Counsel for the title company is talking to their insurer. I expect an appetite for making you whole." "Thank you," I said, because sometimes gratitude is the only sentence that behaves. Across the table, the scratch of a pen measured out 10-minute increments. Mark paused once to ask the date of the hospital discharge. I told him. He kept writing. When he finished, Dana reviewed the pages without expression, then slid the settlement signature page under his hand. "Sign there and there," she said. "Initial the margin by each numbered term." He did. Dana stamped the notary block with a quiet firmer than any voice. The sound felt like a lid being set on a pot that had boiled too long. "We'll circulate the final, with numbers by Friday," she said, gathering the stack into a shape. "Funds from escrow will be released upon execution. Any remainder owed will be wired in 2 tranches over 30 days. If a payment is missed, the agreement permits immediate suit and fee shifting. If you communicate with my client directly without permission, we will treat it as a breach." Mark nodded. There was no argument left. He looked at me, and for a second I could see the outline of the child inside, the man stubborn, decent, misled, culpable. "May I speak to my mother for a moment?" he asked. Dana glanced at me. I weighed the request and gave a short nod. She left the door open, and the paralegal pretended to check a printer within earshot. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, not looking at the table this time. I want you to know I see it. Not just what we did, what we tried to make it mean." "What you tried to make it mean," I said, "doesn't interest me anymore. What you did is written down. That interests me." He swallowed and nodded. Understood. We stood. In the reception area, he started to reach for a hug and then stopped, his hand hovering in air like a bird reconsidering a landing. I saved us both and extended my hand. He took it as if it were fragile and also the only thing keeping him upright. Outside, the light had shifted. Tucson makes a ceremony of late afternoon shadows laid carefully across sidewalks, a polite breeze to move the dust. We walked to the corner where our ways split and said goodbye like colleagues who had survived a long meeting. Back at the casita, Alma had left a bowl of beans on the stove with a note. "Take what you need. There's cornbread in the blue tin." I ladled a small amount and ate standing by the sink because some meals asked to be unadorned. Then I opened the red folder and slid the signed pages into their tabs. Settlement affidavit, the paper heavier now in a way that felt exactly right. I washed the bowl and set it to dry. The window let in a square of light that warmed the counter. When it moved on, I didn't follow it. I sat at the table instead and wrote 3 sentences in a notebook under the word boundaries. They were not plans. They were measurements I could hold up to things. When the phone buzzed again, it was Dana. Escrow confirms funds. Release scheduled for tomorrow a.m., Title Council Cooperative. I'll send final numbers for your review. I typed back, received. Then I turned the ringer off and put the phone in the drawer with the jar of mismatched screws Ruth had insisted I keep. The casita settled around me, small and exact. I made tea. The kettle clicked off. Outside, the sky went the particular shade of blue that happens only once on its way to evening. I stood in the doorway with the mug warming my hands, and I let the quiet do what it does when you give it room. The wire cleared at 9:17 a.m. Dana forwarded the escrow confirmation with a subject line that didn't pretend to be more than it was funds received. The itemized sheet showed my half of the sale at fair market value, less standard costs plus the $30,000. Numbers that had once been theoretical now sat in my account like furniture that finally belonged to me. I walked to the corner bakery and bought a cinnamon roll because paperwork occasionally deserves frosting. Alma poured coffee when I came back and read the confirmation like it was a weather report that promised a dry weekend. "Good," she said. "Now the air can move," Omar called at noon. "We'll stage the cash, not scatter it," he said. "First tranche into the trust's short-term bucket. The rest laddered where it can earn quietly. No heroics." "No heroics," I said, and watched the red folder look a shade less loud on the table. Dana's last email of the day attached the signed final. "Title Council will file their internal report. Insurer is closing their loop. Your revocations are of record. Keep your copies." I slid the new pages under settlement and closed the binder with a small care that felt like closing a door without slamming it. In the afternoon, I took the bus to a thrift store and found a narrow bookshelf that once held someone else's paperbacks. Alma helped me muscle it into the casita. I wiped the dust with a damp cloth and set my few books on it. 2 novels, a field guide to desert birds. A spiral notebook with inventory on the first page. Robert's photo went on top beside Alma's loaned radio that only finds jazz and baseball. Ruth texted a victory emoji she would deny knowing how to use. "Dinner when I'm in Tucson next week," she added. "I'll bring the good napkins." I typed back deal. Then I turned my phone face down and let the room breathe without the glow. Kara called the next morning. Viewers wrote in, she said, her voice more neighbor than producer. "A lot of women your age, some younger. They asked for specifics. Would you consider coming back?" "We'll hold the line on privacy." I agreed to one segment taped in Phoenix again. This time I carried a list. Omar and Dana had approved verbs more than numbers: consolidate, verify, revoke, document, delegate. Amber kept the questions clean. No one said the 72 out loud. When we finished, she squeezed my hand and said, "You make complicated things sound manageable." I drove home with the radio off the road, a straight sentence I could read without stopping. An hour after the show aired, a text arrived from Mark. "Saw it? You were steady? Thank you for not." He didn't finish the sentence. Another followed. "I've moved into a rental month to month, working with a counselor. I sent Lena contact info for Dana in case she needs her own counsel. Then I won't call without going through Ms. Whitmore. I'll do the rest of the payments on time. No plea, no small hooks. I answered with one word that did the job: acknowledged." Days arranged themselves into something ordinary. Morning walks before the heat gathered. A chair on the porch that listened better than most people. Water aerobics at the rec center where the instructor's whistle made everyone 10 years younger for 45 minutes. Alma's library yielded a memoir about a woman who learned the names of desert plants and found she could think more clearly when she could label what was already there. On a Tuesday, the community association held a swap in the parking lot. I brought a vase that had never learned to like me and left with a ceramic bowl the color of night water. A teenager traded me a small potted basil for a stack of magazines and told me basil prefers conversation to silence. I promised to try. Omar sent quarterly statements that were readable without aspirin. The trust's short-term bucket held steady. The latter earned without commentary. He wrote, "Call if you feel itchy to adjust." I wrote back, "Not itchy." The steadiness felt like a room with good airflow. Mark emailed the wire confirmations on schedule. He kept to counsel as agreed. No commentary crept into the memos. The subject lines were dates. Once he added a single sentence at the bottom, "Thank you for the chance to do this right," then left it alone. I let that sit where it was. One afternoon, I opened the blue cabinet Alma had forgotten to label and found a stack of old postcards from places she'd never visited: Paris, Duluth, a lake in Idaho that looked made up. I asked her why she kept them. "Proof that a life stretches," she said, "even when you don't leave town." I taped one of the postcards near the bookshelf, the Idaho lake, all clean edges and sky, because it reminded me of the casita in a color I had never seen. In early evening, the desert light took its time. Neighbors watered small squares of green that looked like hope. Somewhere down the block, a saxophone practiced the same measure until it behaved. I sat at the table and wrote boundaries at the top of a new page and copied the 3 lines from the last page because some principles earn repetition. Money and decisions live on paper. Help is a noun and a verb. It is asked for, not imposed. Silence is allowed. I set the pen down. Outside, a coyote moved along the far fence as quiet as a sentence that knows its own weight. The basil smelled like a kitchen in July. The radio carried a ball game from 1,000 miles away and made it sound like it was happening around the corner. When the lamp began to draw the bugs, I turned it off and opened the window. Air slid in with the frankness I had come to expect. The bookshelf held. The trust papers did not rearrange themselves in the dark. In the quiet, my breath counted like someone keeping time. The casita was not the house I had left, and it did not try to be. It was a room I chose with keys that answered only to my hand. I rinsed the coffee mug and set it upside down, a small ordinary ritual with a well-earned place. Then I went to bed and the night came in clean. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.